welcome to episode 282 of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian beginning my 18th year, I knew I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. Amanda Jones's upcoming book, That Librarian, will be available starting on August 27th, but you can pre-order your copy now. And if you use the indie bookseller, Cavalier House Books, in Amanda's hometown of Denham Springs, Louisiana, you will get a signed copy. I've included a link in the show notes. When you look at the cover of Amanda's book, you might recognize the Freedom Fighter shirt she's wearing. She reached out to the designer, Christy, who then designed a line of That Librarian apparel, as well as That Librarian flair, such as a bag, sticker, and mug. I love that we can all be that librarian who advocates for our library and our students' access to books every day. You will find a link to this online store in our show notes. 15% of the proceeds go to the Texas Library Association, as that is the home state of the designer. There's a good chance some listeners tuning in are familiar with DEMCO School Library Planner, and I'm guessing several of you have already ordered and even received yours in the mail. This passion project is very much the product of Christina Holzweiss's vision and conviction that school librarians deserve a planner designed with us in mind. This is the second year I was honored to be invited to contribute as one of the 53 school librarians to provide helpful tips, strategies, and resources for this planner. And, fun fact, longtime listeners will recognize 22 of these school librarians as past guests on the podcast. I just happened to share a page with Lucas Maxwell, who's been a guest on the show 5 times. I'm so grateful that Christina spearheads this project each year. I've included a link in today's show notes. Take a look. This spiral-bound, comprehensive planner includes customizable tabs, month at a glance, ample space for daily notes, and goal setting, as well as resources like daily celebrations, literature awards, and forms for completing needs assessments, curriculum mapping, grant writing, book fair planning, book requests, organizing your vendors, budgeting, weeding, and self-reflection prompts, professional reflections, and much, much more. Consider treating yourself to this valuable tool in making the most of this upcoming school year. I've included a link in today's show notes. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestion. You can reach me either on Facebook, on X, formerly known as Twitter. My handle is at LMS_United. On Threads, you can find me at School Librarians United and on Blue Sky at SLU Podcast, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. And now a word from our sponsor, Capstone. Capstone is an innovative publisher and education technology provider of children's content for school libraries, classrooms, and at-home learning. Home of the award-winning PebbleGo research database, Capstone has a passion for creating inspired learning and intellectual curiosity in children, and I'm so excited to be working with them. I am also grateful to Capstone for their commitment to support the podcast in Season 6. They are offering listeners of School Librarians United a very special discount. Visit shop.capstonepub.com and use the code UNITED to get $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and Capstone interactive ebooks. That's code UNITED for $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and ebooks on shop.capstonepub.com. And now for today's episode, Motivating Middle School Readers, and my conversation with Todd Burleson. Friends, I'm so excited. Todd Burleson, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
You know, you and I have crisscrossed social media over the years, and you have been on my fairly short list of people who have to be on the show, and I haven't gotten around to it. So thank you so much for joining us. You and I love making these connections, 7 degrees of separation. In this case, it's only one. Dr. Andrea Trudeau, you and I have a friend in common.
Absolutely. Dr. Trudeau, I love saying that now. she and I were in library school together at National Louis University. So we sat in many classes together.
And it's so nice when you have those kinds of connections at the state level. And I'm old enough that I don't think there was anybody I remember from when I was going through library school, and that's okay. For listeners who are just tuning in, would you introduce yourself? Would you tell us about your library and the grades you serve? And, we're going to be talking a lot about the programs you offer, but give us an idea of, what's your schedule like?
Obviously, I'm Todd Burleson. I am a teacher librarian. I work in Winnetka, Illinois, which is a northern suburb of Chicago by about 20 miles. You can see the Sears Tower, or as they now call it, the Willis Tower, as you leave the freeway to go to my school. So I kind of like that. And I know that I'm close enough that I could get there if I wanted, but I'm just far enough away as well. So northern suburb of Chicago, small school district. We are only 3 elementary schools, a 5th and 6th grade building, which is where I work, called the Skokie School. And then one other school in our district is the Carlton Washburn School, which is our 7th and 8th grade building. And I have been at the Skokie School for 5 years. I just finished my 5th year in 5th and 6th grade. And prior to that, I was a K-4 librarian at Hubbard Woods School. And prior to being an elementary librarian, I had also been a 3rd and 4th grade teacher, around 20 years at Hubbard Woods, and then I guess a little longer than that, because I just finished my 27th year in Winnetka. So what is my schedule like? Well, I actually teach a really interesting class called LIT, which stands for Literature Integrated Technology. And I teach that class to almost all 5th graders. And I see them on a rotating A-B schedule, so essentially every other day, for the 33-minute period that we have in our school. And I co-teach that class with a technology instructor named Gina Wild, who is phenomenal. And she and I have collaborated to kind of blend really like a digital literacy, digital citizenship with more kind of holistic literature-based learning activities. I was on Steve's podcast and I talked about one of the projects that we did this year called Bookprints, which is truly a fantastic merge of literacy and technology, because it was a multifaceted project that kind of looked at the students' development as readers. And the finished product was basically a multimedia project of their entire reading lives, which is really, really fun. So it's that sort of thing that we've done in this class that I think has been just really amazing for us as educators. I really enjoy working with colleagues, and I also am just having a lot of fun. And I think that if I'm having a lot of fun, then I know the kids are going to have fun. So, and this is just the second year. This is just the second year of that program. So last year it was okay, but this year was great. And next year will be even better.
The learning curve is steep. Anytime you start something new, it's not going to be perfect the first time. So I have to ask, so you see every 5th grade student, and that is on a rotation. How much of your day is fixed in that you really have sort of a lockstep with this other teacher that you co-teach with?
Yeah, so we have 11 periods in our day, and 3 of those periods are this fixed class that I teach. Typically 2, sometimes 4, but typically 2 more periods a day are either a 5th grade or a 6th grade advisory as a whole class comes, it's during their ELA block, but they'll come for one period, and the focus of those visits is multifaceted as well. So sometimes it will be a genre tasting or a book tasting, or it will be during our monthly observances. I will introduce a resource to the students and give them some time to explore and learn, and then have generally some sort of reflection or response to what they've learned. So it's kind of a mixture of literacy / awareness / kind of just general interest, unique opportunities that they don't get many other opportunities to explore.
So I have to clarify. So you say you have 12 periods, then presumably those are 35 minutes apiece, something along those lines?
Yeah. 11 periods that are 33 minutes
periods
long. There is a 12th period. It's called our advisory, and that's in the morning between, depending on the day, it's approximately 20 to 25 minutes long.
Every school does it differently, right?
Yeah.
I'm just thinking in my school, our periods are 59 minutes long. So hopefully we don't have 11 of any of those.
Oh, yeah, that would be hard. So our advisory is, I'm paired with a specific class for that period, and I co-teach advisory with another, and in my case, it's a 6th grade teacher. So I work with him throughout the year on social emotional literacy and integrating all sorts of activities around that idea.
I was really excited. Every time I see you post on social media, you are sharing something that looks like I would like to have been a student in your school, because I think all the things that you're doing are really reaching out to all the students in your school community, the 5th and the 6th graders, but they all in many ways bring the students into your space, and there is that celebration of reading and that component regardless of what you're doing, whether it's technology, whether a digital literacy and so forth. But I'm hoping you will share with us some of the amazing things that you do in your program which keep the kids coming through the door. This is a place they enjoy coming. I have an SLJ Librarian of the Year, we do have to gush. That is such an accolade, such a monumental celebration of you and the amazing things that you do in your school community. So 2016, would you give us a rundown of what it was that really attracted the judges when they were looking at you as a candidate?
Sure. It is such an honor to talk about that period. As I mentioned, I had been an elementary teacher in my school at Hubbard Woods for many years, and the librarian, also a male librarian, which is pretty neat at a elementary school, was a beloved man, Bob Golden. He was in our district for 30 years, and when he was getting ready to retire, he had told me, and I was considering becoming a librarian at that point. I knew I kind of needed a change. I had been teaching for a couple of decades, and I was looking for a new challenge. And so I started at National Lewis in my library program, where I met Dr. Trudeau, and decided, this was going to be really fun. And so when the time came for Bob to retire, I applied for the position, and they ended up hiring me. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to bring this really 20th century library into the 21st century. I initially started on my very first day of summer, my very first summer of being the new librarian. One of my best friends also was a teacher at my school. He and I, on day one, showed up to work at like 4:30 in the morning and proceeded to essentially destroy our library. We went through 2 dumpsters of material, old software that we didn't even have machines that ran, materials that haven't been used in 25, 30, 35, sometimes 40 years. So we basically did a full clean of the library. And one of the things that was going to happen that summer is they were actually going to put new carpet into the library. And we looked at the library and we were like, wow, this is amazing. New carpet, this is super. And then we looked at the bookcases, which were bolted to the floor. And we thought, they're just going to carpet around that. And we'll never, this is over 30 years old carpet. We're not going to have another opportunity in my career to get new carpet. So we decided, well, we need to do something about these bookcases. And so we took every book off the bookcases, and I believe we had around 20,000 items. We moved them all, and I brought my 20-pound sledgehammer, and we literally broke every bookcase off of their bases. And it was at about that point when the former librarian came into the library to return his key and a couple of things. And I was just sweating buckets, and it just looked like a bomb had gone off in the library. And he walked in and his expression said thousands of words. He looked at me and said, "Oh, looks like you're pretty busy here." And I said, "Yeah, we're going to make these bookcases so that we can move them anywhere we want." And I'll never forget what he said. He said, "Be careful what you wish for." And I said, "I think we'll be okay." And he quickly left. And that was just the beginning of an incredible renovation of the physical space. And then with that craziness, after year one, I started looking at how else can we, bring this space into a new decade, a new century. And I started brainstorming with the PTO and got just a core group of amazing people who were also interested in helping renovate and bring the space together. And we started going around and interviewing different librarians in different schools all over the region. We went to Wisconsin, we went into Chicago, and all over the tri-state area, and just visited and spent hours and hours of time just learning. And in the end, they had actually said to me, "Well, do you have any ideas?" And I pulled out a binder that I had of my dreams of what I wanted. And I showed them, and they were like, "Wow, okay, this is good. This is good. Let's do this. Let's do that. Let's do this." And so in the end, with parent volunteers and support and good friends, and our custodians were incredible, we completely renovated our library. And we did it for next to nothing because of all of the labor that was donated. And I think that in creating that space, and I think getting the community involved in that, I think is what a couple parents heard about the award and were like, "We're going to nominate you for that." And I said, "Well, that's an honor. I mean, just to be nominated, I was incredibly honored." And then when they described me as the Willy Wonka of librarians, I mean, that's a huge compliment, to be called the Willy Wonka of librarians. I was just so touched, that it meant so much. So when that award happened, it really meant the world to me at the time. I immediately planned to go to DC for the gathering they had that, I think it was October. And I started reaching out online to the new, at that time, Librarian of Congress, Carla Hayden, and her people reached back out to me. And I said, "I'm going to be there. Wouldn't it be neat if I could chat with you?" And I ended up not only getting to meet with her, but we went out on her patio and overlooks, all of the Capitol area. It's as she says, it's the best view in DC. But that to me was equally mind-blowing to get to go visit with the Librarian of Congress, and it was just a phenomenal experience all around.
I gotta say, when you said sledgehammer, I had some concerns. And, the fact that I know how this ends means it was okay. You didn't lose your job. Could have gone a very different direction. And I'm going to tell you a couple of things that I hear is, number one, I think what's vitally important is that not only did you have vision, but you made sure that your stakeholders knew exactly that you had ideas that now we're going to require some partnership. As you said, free labor. and anytime we work over the summer, one of my guests said that was their hobby time. That was their hobby time. They're going to go, it's like me and the podcast. This is my hobby time. But when you go into your space over the summer and you are as motivated as you are, and you bring in all of these different stakeholders some of whom are just labor, some who have money, some who have connections, building those networks, and appreciating that it is going to take time for this to all sort of come into place. I do love one of the things that was mentioned in your article. It was somebody had quoted that it's hard to find an aspect of the school that hasn't been impacted by Burleson's vision. Because when you created this, I think you called it an idea lab.
In addition to the library, we took what used to be our computer lab, and with our students being one-to-one iPads, we didn't utilize that space as effectively as I thought we could. And so we turned that computer lab into an idea lab, and we added 3D printers and a carving machine, tons of different creative tools. I mean, everything, high-tech stuff, but also tons of low-tech materials that students then had access to during their class times, but also individual grade levels or classes would work with me to complete a project around an idea, a design thinking idea that we would utilize those materials for.
Todd, I'm so curious because you now are in a different school and you were able to transform one space. You are now creating that kind of impact in another school. And you've talked to us a little bit about your lit class, Literature Integrated with Tech class, which you teach. And friends, I want to make sure I will include show notes, a link to Steve Tatro's conversation with Todd about your Bookprints program, because I think that's just so fun. And it's something which, when you listen to the episode that you have with Steve, it's something that people could implement in their own space and put their own spin on it. Let's talk about a few more things that you do in that lit program, because I love the fact that you are impacting every single fifth grader in your school.
A couple of projects that have evolved over these 2 years of teaching this class. One is the Genre Personality Project. And I cannot claim that as my own. It came from another librarian, basically a quiz that you can give your students to help them identify what type of genres they would most be interested in reading. And her initial project then linked, for example, like adventure. And then she had all sorts of fiction and nonfiction books that people who were adventurous would probably find interesting. And what I did was took her idea, which was phenomenal, and I integrated it or I adapted it to my own space and to my own students and personalized the book lists and created bookmarks that go along with that, color-coded them, printed them, and then students took this quiz together and found their genre personalities. And then through Destiny, I created collections with these books, which are very easy for me then to add to. And so over the past couple of years, we've been able to keep adding books and even getting student feedback on, this book should go on the adventurer, or this book would go great on fantasy. So then the bookmarks keep getting updated as well. And so this is just a really neat way for the kids to explore other genres and to possibly find books maybe that they haven't had a chance to read or don't even think about. So that project was fantastic.
Something I am admittedly terrible at is teaching my students how to use the online card catalog. I create resource lists because I'm the one doing the displays. I create the resource lists because I'm sharing them with the teachers. So like, hey, when you teach this unit, here are our resource lists. But what I'm not very good at is reinforcing this idea that the student should also have that ability to find things. So am I correct that when you create your genres, you have resource lists which allow the students to sort of shop on your using Destiny? And that's wonderful because it's empowering them. Because am I correct that you do not have a genrefied collection? It is alpha order by author's last name. Okay.
Yes.
So it is important that they learn how to find these books using your card catalog.
Yeah, and we've really kind of, in my 5 years in this school, we've really kicked around the idea of genre finding, and ultimately our space is so small that we opted to go 100% into talking about collections. And I still get kids that come in every once in a while and where are the fantasy books? And that breaks my heart because I wish I were able to reorganize that library in a way that would meet the needs of those students in that way. But in what I have found as an alternative is to, as you mentioned, truly pound in the idea of, first of all, always bring your iPad with you when you come to the library, because we have them search Destiny to see if the book is, first of all, even in the library, or put it on hold. And we're constantly updating and adding to those collections. And so whenever a student comes and says, I'm looking for a fiction book on a character who's struggling through, adversity, we'll often say, I can certainly help you with that, but why don't you pull up your iPad? Let's look at the collection on people overcoming obstacles. And why don't you take a second and look through that? Again, trying to empower them. It's not that I don't want to help them. I want them to be the arbiter of what they choose.
Well, and something I really like about your solution, first of all, you are teaching the students to solve their own questions. The other thing I love is because you are creating these lists in your collection, your digital collection, now you can cross-post them. So, the struggle I have in having genrefied is I very clearly have books which could equally be found in 2 different genres at least. And in some circumstances, I'll buy 2 copies and put them in different locations and see which one gets that traffic. But you can do it digitally. You can have things in multiple collections and therefore get even more readership than you would in somebody like myself who has made the decision to put this book in this genre. You may lose readers who wouldn't necessarily think to look in that collection. So there are pros and cons all over the place, but I love that you're empowering your students. I think that's great.
Thank you. The other project that you mentioned is the Choose Your Own Adventure project. And that just kind of evolved out of my own remembrance of reading those Choose Your Own Adventure stories as a young person and just being immersed in them, and then noticing how they truly are the beginning of essentially games, electronic games that kids play. I remember some of the very early games I played on Atari. You would make a decision and that decision would, impact the next decision. And things like Pitfall, you could learn exactly what to do every time. And it never took away the excitement of trying to jump over a particular crocodile or whatever it was. You just made different choices each time. That's where it started, was like, wow, this is exciting. And then I found a phenomenal resource of a data visualization guy who takes data, large sets of data, and finds beautiful ways to share that with people. And he focused on choose your own adventure stories and actually went back and found every single one of the covers. And then he went in and showed every single choice that was made and how those choices impacted. And so I just became a complete nerd and like obsessed on this site for like 2 weeks and found it so beautiful that I was like, I want to show this to kids and get them excited about this. And then I did, and they didn't really get as excited as I was. And I wasn't sure why. And then I talked to a couple kids. I'm like, well, why isn't this neat to you? And they're like, I don't really understand it. I don't really get what's going on. And so then I started thinking about it and exploring online and finding other people who had tried to do this with their students. And I spent about a month basically looking at every resource I could get my hands on for teaching choose your own adventure stories with kids. And they were all pretty good, but I knew my readers, I knew my kids, and I knew their struggles and what they would have trouble with. And eventually kind of came up with a completely unique approach to it. And I found the most useful thing was actually giving kids the opportunity to, first of all, explore the choose your own adventure stories. And then what was really helpful was for them to do some interactive stories online where they would read with a partner and make those choices and make those decisions. And then afterward, we would have them talk about, how do you think this was written? How do you think they did this? How do they plan this? How do they keep it all straight? And then when I showed them those maps, they were blown away. Then they really appreciated the choice maps and the page turns and all of that. And then we took that a step farther and created a planning doc to help them organize their thoughts. And I saw many people who did this and they did it on paper, like they actually had the kids do the planning on paper. And the challenge of that is no matter how big you make the boxes, you're limited to the physical box. And so I started exploring whiteboard in Canva and realized that it's infinite. It can go there's no limit. And so I created a template, and as the kids added to their templates, the boxes just got bigger and everything stayed, all the connections stayed. And so that became sort of the aha, like, wow, this is the way to do it. And then we took these colors that I used on the template to create a Google slide presentation that had the exact same colors of the Canva template. And so students simply just copied and pasted their text into the Google slide document, and the links were already built in the doc. They had already done that in one of our earlier projects this year. So I knew they could do it, and I knew they knew how to do it. We almost ran out of time at the end of the year. And so this was sort of an expedience thing. But there were also kids who weren't happy with just 2 choices. Like they wanted 3 choices or they wanted 4. I'm like, well, you can do that, but you're going to have to do a little bit more, legwork. You're going to have to add these slides and add the links. And they did it. They took that challenge. So in the end, we had these just so much fun choose your own adventures that the students loved sharing with each other and learning from each other. And it was, as I said, so much fun and just a perfect example of what the lit class, when we dreamed it up, what we wanted it to be. And it was exactly that.
Well, and I love that you have this idea that you're incorporating literacy. They are using skills, they're building stories as authors, and they're also using that technology component to be able to engage with their readers. And so it really is just a win all around. When I look at the different things that you do to motivate and excite the love of reading in your school, I have to ask, one thing really jumps off the page, and that is you're in a 5th, 6th school, and you do the One School, One Book program, which makes so much sense. I've kind of pushed back against this program because if you work in a traditional, in an elementary school where we have our 5-year-olds and our 11-year-olds and everybody in between, it really is, I've seen it sort of, it's not a home run for everybody. Let's just put it that way. I'm sure it's well done and a lot of people enjoy it. But for me, what I see is that people on either end, the really young kids and the oldest kids in the group, have a hard time getting excited about a book that's somewhere in the middle in a 2nd, 3rd grade reader. And you have a sweet spot here. You've got students who are only 1 year apart, and you can do this. I'm dying to know. You've done One School, One Book for 4 years now. Would you tell us which books you did?
Yes. I do have to tweak your description just a tiny bit, because while we're a 5th and 6th grade building, just across the green is our 7th and 8th grade building. And we started it as one book, one campus. And the idea was to bridge the two campuses, because when we started, the intention was, as a district, we were going to be merging the two schools. That has since not come to fruition. And we've continued the project to make that transition when students do go to the 7th and 8th grade building a little bit easier. So that's kind of the nebulous of the actual project.
So friends, I'm going to ask that Todd be sure to include those titles that he's done with your One Campus, One Book. And I just think it's fun because when you realize your students in your building are going across the street to another school, and this program is that sort of nice little link from one space to another, would you be sure in our show notes to include those titles? Because anytime we talk about one school, one book, or one campus, one book, the question that everybody asks is, what titles did you pick?
I want to address that specifically because I think even at the 5th through 8th grade, that's a huge range as well. And the 7th and 8th grade librarian, Katie Nelson, and I have had many conversations about this, and we wanted to make it work for all of the students. And last year we did Alone by Megan E. Freeman, which so happened to win the Illinois Rebecca Caudle Young Readers Award, which was phenomenal because we actually had her come to our school last year as part of the program. This year, it's really interesting because we're having Dusty Bowling come in March. And Katie and I were talking, and we felt like we wanted to find not just one particular book, but we wanted to do almost an author study with Dusty. And so we chose The Canyon's Edge, which is a novel in verse, very adventurous. It's described as Hatchet meets Long Way Down. It's sort of really neat connection there. And I really like that it is a novel in verse. It's easily accessible. It's adventurous, and it's going to hook all of those readers. But Katie had a really good point. She knew that a lot of students had already read that book in the older grades. And so what we decided to do was give the 7th and 8th grade students a choice of 4 of Dusty's books. And actually a good number of them did choose The Canyon's Edge. So that was pretty neat. But then those students are receiving those books, or they received them at the end of the school year a couple of weeks ago. And everyone is essentially reading those books. And we will, like I said, have Dusty come in March. But because that's the only time we could get her to come, So there's a large span between September and March. And so we have all sorts of writing contests and challenges and weekly vocabulary words and poetry contests, all sorts of things that we've talked about having for our students and teachers to kind of keep the ideas fresh. And then when Dusty comes in March, she's going to actually do 3 days in our district and work with us in writers' workshops as well as just a general presentation. Each year it has gotten better. We had during, I believe it was our first year, we actually had an author visit us via Zoom, which was neat. And then we had Megan Freeman come last year, which was phenomenal. And then this year is just going to be even better.
I think it's indicative of the commitment that your joint campuses have made to this celebration of an author and the impact that the reading can have, especially when you bring that author there just for a sustained period of time. When I think of most situations that I've seen where you have an author visit, it's a one and done, knock it out in 55 minutes. And while that is lovely and wonderful and fantastic, and the kids get excited and the teachers find that these books are getting read and it really does have an impact on our students, the lasting impact of having somebody there in your space for an extended period of time where you can tap that sort of energy and talent, and your students have not just one opportunity to engage, but multiple opportunities to engage. What a celebration. And clearly your school has made this financial commitment to make this possible.
Yes.
That sounds absolutely wonderful. So obviously, friends, yes, some projects take money, some take time, and some take both. Let's talk about some more things that help you celebrate the reading that happens on your campus. I do want to ask you,
yes,
the E-Train Talks, do you incorporate that into your lessons, and tell us how?
That is an awesome story. E-Train Talks is a 13-year-old book talker that probably all of your listeners have connected with online. He started out during COVID, basically posting a few book talks and reaching out to the world and saying, hey, would you like to come talk to me? And that has just exploded. And I actually used one of his book talks with my sixth graders about 6 or 7 months ago. And they were just blown away by how professional, how well-spoken, how articulate he was. And so I reached out to him online and just said, hey, I just want to thank you for your book talks. You know, I've used several of them and my students really like them. And he was so gracious and responsive and said, you know, thank you so much. Would you ever want maybe to do like a virtual visit with your students? And I said, that would be amazing. And so we scheduled a time. And then about a week or two later, he emailed me and said, I'm going to be in Chicago May 9th for this conference I'm going to. Are you anywhere near the Rosemont where the conference was? And I said, yeah, we're about 25 minutes away. And he said, well, what would you like me to come and do an actual visit? And I was like, yeah, I think that might be pretty cool. and so we worked it out where he came and did a 45-minute presentation with my 5th and 6th graders and shared his message of positivity and kindness and ending book deserts and literacy and love of learning and love of reading. And he just inspired the kids in so many ways. And of course, you know, before he came, I did tons and tons of build up for them. And they had tons of questions, which they submitted to him ahead of time. And he answered some of them, but he just did something here maybe a week or so ago, where he made a special video just for our students and answered a bunch more. of their questions. And so we learned that this was actually his first time speaking to that large of a group and to that age children. He had spoken to younger kids and he had spoken to classrooms, but he had never spoken to a whole school before. So that was a pretty big rush for him to experience. And then his parents were with him, obviously. He's 13. He wasn't driving himself. They were incredible parents. And he came and took a tour of our library and spent some time just kind of exploring our spaces and stuff. And he's just a fabulous human being. So proud of him. And he and I are going to be working together this next year in a mentorship role for a project that he's doing. I believe it's the Congressional Medal Program, where he essentially does what he's already doing, but does it in a way that at the end, there's a program that he's going to be applying for, which is pretty cool. But he needs a mentor. And so I'm honored that he asked me to be his mentor. So, yeah.
What I love about this story is that you were so moved by watching this young man motivate readers for whom he does not have that sort of personal, one-on-one engagement. But you just take a chance, right? You just take a chance, reach out, and I'm sorry, friends, I do that all the time with the podcast. I just reach out, I just say, hey, how about, would you like to come and talk? And you know what? Sometimes it's crazy. People say yes. It's awesome. So no, I love that you do that. And it's indicative of what we do on behalf of our students. Because what I do is on behalf of my listeners. What you did was clearly out of a passion for reading and hoping to inspire your students in a way that, forgive me, you and I generationally are not going to have the same kind of impact that this 13-year-old will with your students. And we're okay with that. Like, I'm not going to pretend to be a 13-year-old to appeal to my students. Let's talk about a few more things that you are doing to excite the love of reading in your space. Sounds like you're allowed to work with students during that lunchtime. Some buildings aren't real cool about having kids in the library during lunch. It sounds like you're allowed to.
Yeah, our kids, like most kids, are so programmed both before and after school that one of the only times they are free to do things is during their lunch at school. And we have been doing lunchtime book clubs with our students ever since I've been there and prior to me even being there as well. But we have both 5th and 6th grade lunches, and there are 4 lunch periods. So we basically see the kids for those 30 minutes. And we've experimented with all sorts of different, approaches. What has seemed to work is for everybody to bring their lunches to the library, eat your lunch, and then we spend the last 15 to 20 minutes talking about the books. We'll spend about 3 to 4 weeks on one particular book. We meet once a week, usually Tuesday. That's been the day that kind of works out for everybody. It's been a fabulous way just to get kids to interact, to explore literature, and there are always students who would much rather not be in the loud lunchroom. I am so glad that we're able to provide that. One of the challenges in the past, and it will be this year as well, is that we often have classes scheduled during that time. And so we've had to do some, kind of balancing to find spaces where we can have these book clubs. I do have an amazing associate who is actually a certified librarian as well, but she enjoys being our associate in our library. And she is such a capable and amazing human who loves leading book clubs. So we will split that responsibility. And I may be teaching the class. She'll take the group and do the book club, but we work together to come up with the programming for each of those clubs.
I have to ask you, because I saw this and I realize we are, at least those of us here on this side of the planet, we are in the middle of summer. our friends in Australia and New Zealand are actually in the middle of winter, but anyway. But it is the Summer Reading Challenge, Get Caught Reading. And I'll be honest, I'm always a little leery of anything that requires the kids to keep track of their reading over the summer. It sounds more like an assignment, but I like this take on celebrating reading. Can you tell listeners a little bit about this? Because you did include a link in our show notes.
Yes, absolutely. So again, not my idea. This is from the Every Child a Reader organization, and they have posters that you can order for free with different authors and famous individuals around the world who are reading, Get Caught Reading. And they even have a Get Caught Listening piece to this as well. And that's where the idea came for me. And I have found that summer reading to be wildly unpopular with my students. I cannot get them to participate in summer reading programs. And it's mostly they're just so busy. And so this is an attempt to encourage kids to have fun with it. And essentially, it's exactly what it sounds like. Get caught reading somewhere with a book, doing something somewhere, the crazier the better. I've got a student who is going to Tanzania this summer, and he said, I'm going to climb to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro and I'm going to bring my book. I was like, you do that? That's awesome. So he is going to send me photos from Africa, which is amazing. I've already had some students. One sent me pictures of her reading with her toothbrush in her mouth. And the whole idea, again, just get caught reading, celebrate reading, and every single photo that they send is an entry into a raffle drawing when school starts back up in the fall. And my hope is that I will continue to get donations from local businesses for ice cream cones, gift cards, things like that. So hopefully it doesn't cost anything.
I think it's fun. And especially when you get that sort of buy-in from the students, and then they share with their families, oh, take a picture of me. And you're like, why? And you're like, because my librarian. And you're like raising the profile of what we do. I will say, as a proud Michigander, I had my Get Caught Reading picture taken of me at the Sleeping Bear Dunes in Michigan. Now, I know that you know where that is. Turning our attention towards, next year, you are already making plans to do some fun things. Tell us about the School Library Advisory Board.
Yes. So again, not my idea. A librarian in a community that borders us took her school library advisory board on a field trip to our local library. And the library posted an image of the students kind of enjoying some snacks and talking with the librarians. And I reached out to them and said, this is an amazing idea. I want to do this. And they connected me with this librarian who I've been in correspondence with. But the idea is simple. It's basically find students who either have a proclivity toward, librarianship, or maybe they just love books, or maybe they're a student that just doesn't want, to be in the lunchroom one period a week or something like that. Just kids who are interested. And basically we're going to do, I'm going to have the students come up with the ideas, but I'll throw them some softballs, such as, we could make book trailers, or we could feature members of the School Library Advisory Board as the reader features and have them choose a favorite book and write a quick reason, why, and post that in the library. Let them adopt a shelf and, put their own favorite books out, so these books are recommended by, and have those students there. I had a meeting at the end of the school year with the public library and told them some of the ideas and just pitched a whole bunch of them to them. And one of the ideas that we came up with was the summer reading program is always, they struggle with the same things that we do, and participation. And I had said, well, what if my slab is what we call it. What if the slab made a video for you promoting your summer reading program. And they were like, oh my gosh, that would be so much better than anything we would ever make. Like the kids would listen to the kids talking about summer reading. Like that would be great. And so just, ideas like that are ones that we're going to throw out there and see what the kids are really interested in. And I'm just hoping that, we'll get a small group to start and it'll grow as kids continue to hear about it and learn about it and kids are interested. And I have a feeling with some of the fifth graders this year who are now going to be sixth graders, we've got some pretty awesome readers in that group that I know are going to want to take part in this. So that's one of the things we're hoping to be able to put into place for next year.
Todd, I have to make sure before you go, I have to ask you, would you please share with listeners a little bit about your blog? Because you have created a fantastic AI repository of resources. And anytime a school librarian does this, my ears perk up because, I appreciate there are educators doing this, but I want a school librarian to take a look at the kinds of resources. And I mentioned earlier in a couple episodes ago about Alyssa Malaspina, who's also put out some really fantastic work. And as a school librarian, would you just give listeners an idea of what they will see when they visit your blog, which is called Use a Bookmark, Please?
So yeah, this is like the fifth permutation of blogging that I've done over my career. This one I would say I'm most proud of aesthetically, but also the content that I've been able to create and what I plan to create in the future. My colleagues in my district, my library colleagues often tease me and say that I should be in charge of professional development for us because I'm always sending them like, hey, this sounds really cool. Thankfully, at one of our most recent professional development days, it was tailored for everybody except us. And we reached out to our admin and said, look, we'd really like to do PD that reflects our learning. And they said, that's fine. Can you come up with some ideas? And they all looked at me and said, well, Todd can. And so I created a whole bunch of resources for them. I didn't create the resources, but I collected the resources. And we all were able to have a choose your own adventure day of professional development. And that kind of got me thinking. I don't know about you, but I use my email box as like my to-do list. If I see something, I will email it to myself so I don't forget. And I had collected way too many emails as we got toward the end of the year with the intention of, summer is when my hobby is professional learning. I had started to collect them and I started to get a little overwhelmed. And I thought, I need to put these in a spreadsheet. And so I started putting them in a spreadsheet. And then I'm like, I'm going to organize this into tabs and different sheets. And it started getting a little crazy. And then it got really big. And I thought, I'm going to share this with my colleagues to see what they think. And of course, they were like, can't even think about this right now. It is almost the end of the school year. I will come back to this. So I thought, well, if there's interest, I'm going to share this because I know that when other librarians have shared things like this, I've been so grateful. And as you often say, we're better together. And I wanted to put this out there in a way that people could take advantage of free professional development for librarians, but also teachers found much of it to be useful. And I know that it's kind of become a thing to like get the digital badges for things, the certifications and, those digital badges that everyone likes to put on their signature or on their website or whatever. And so I added a whole category of simply resources that you could take their free PD and get their digital badges as well. And then I also have been obsessed with AI this past school year and part of a steering committee in our district to develop guidance and policies on that topic. And so I've kind of taken it on own initiative to complete any PD I can on AI. And so I included an entire section on AI PD, and then also a collection of AI tools that I have used and found very useful. So again, it started as like I needed a place to put all my stuff. And then I started reaching out to sharing it with other people and saying, hey, if you know of something else, please let me know and I'll add it to the spreadsheet. And I've gotten quite a few people who have reached out and said, hey, can you put this on there? Hey, can you put this on there? So that's been fantastic.
Todd, I am so grateful you were able to share with us all your expertise today. I am so grateful that you are part of my virtual PLN. And especially, would you let listeners know how we can find you on social media? Because I regularly tap all the things that you share when I have to create PD and my newsletters. So let listeners know how we can find you on social media.
Absolutely. So I am on Twitter a lot, and my Twitter handle there is at Todd_Burleson. I am on Instagram at Burlesot, and I'm also on Instagram with an account that I've created for my library called Skokie School RC. That account is strictly related to school stuff. The Todd_Burleson also gets into book banning and all sorts of things like that I'm also passionate about. But that's where you can find me.
Friends, I hope that you do the deep dive that I did. Follow Todd, because it is every day. I'm like, oh, this is great. I can use this. And, again, you've mentioned so often in our conversation that you didn't create a lot of the things that you've implemented, but you put your own spin on it. You have adapted the things that we share. Librarians are always better together. We take the things that we find, and a rising tide lifts all boats. We truly are better when we make sure that our respective school communities see the amazing things and the value that we bring to our spaces. This isn't a time for any of us to outshine one another. This is about making sure that at the end of the day, you have a job, I have a job, we have schools, we have libraries that value us. And you and I are part of the solution, because we're going to share what we have with our listening audience. Todd Burleson, you are wonderful. I know we're going to cross paths moving forward. And thank you so much for sharing your expertise today.
Thank you for inviting me.
If you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Reviews help others find us. Now is a terrific time to order DEMCO School Library Planner and use the code UNITED to take advantage of Capstone's generous $20 discount off an order of $100 or more. See the link in today's show notes. This week, I am traveling to Juneau to present at a joint conference of the Alaska Library Association and the Alaska Association of School Librarians. I am so excited to be connecting and recording at this conference. The topic of our next episode will be Spotlight, Alaska Association of School Librarians, and the voices of the School Librarians of Alaska. I hope you will tune in.